Welcome back to Bitcoin Season 2. Mayday, Mayday, emergency. Bitcoin is going down, so is everything else. All of your shitcoins, all your meme coins, they're headed to zero. But Bitcoin remains. We're just gonna get into it. It's a pretty exciting day, or really week overall. Because Bitcoin is back down to prices not seen for 3 or 4 months. We are, according to CoinMarketCap, at $55,800 per Bitcoin, which shocked Pikachu. We have not seen since last February. So you know what that means? That means it's over. The bull market is finished. Go back, go reapply to McDonald's. Bitcoin's never going back up. Why is this happening? Well, a little country rather, named Germany is selling all their Bitcoin. Now, is this the actual driver of what is causing the price to go down? We can debate that all day. But basically, the main narrative right now is Germany has a few $1 billion in Bitcoin, and they are selling it. Where does this stack up? I'm going to go to timechainindex.com, a great place to get all of your Bitcoin metrics. And let's just take a look at who owns all the Bitcoin. Obviously, the entities that own the most Bitcoin are going to be your Coinbase, Binance, Bitfinex, BlackRock, Grayscale. The first government on this list is the US government, who owns about 1% of the Bitcoin supply with about 215,000 Bitcoin. Where does Germany stack up? Germany, number 38 as far as entities recognized with Bitcoin treasuries, had or has about 40,000 Bitcoin, which is about 0.2% of the supply. So if in fact Germany is selling all this Bitcoin, this is a grand total of 0.2% of all the Bitcoin that exists being sold into the market over the next few weeks, maybe. It's unclear what their exact plan is, but yes, they are doing that. Is that what is driving the price down? Who knows? I'm going to get right to the meat of this, which is this coincides with the kind of the fallout from the halving. So if you're a Bitcoin miner, and this is one of the titles of this stream here, you're facing some of the least profitable or kind of worst economic conditions you've seen in a long time, at least as measured by hash price. I have here hashrateindex.com, a great research product from Luxor. That this is their hash price index. So what is hash price? It's a measure of how much a unit of hash rate or Bitcoin mining compute, how much a unit of hash rate generates in revenue per day. And as we can see here from the past 5 years, we are at the lowest hash price we've ever been. So the metric here is US dollars per petahash per day. It's basically like if you filled, a third of a shipping container up with mid-tier Bitcoin mining computers, and you turn them on, that part of the shipping container would make about $50 per day. That is barely enough to cover some of these all-in costs of power and operating costs. So what are we seeing here? We are seeing what's a phenomenon we see kind of every time we hit this point in the Bitcoin adoption and mining cycle, which is the capitulation event. This typically follows the halving, where the Bitcoin mining revenue usually is cut in half overnight, but this is coinciding with a drawdown in price. Now, we saw a massive price run up the 6 months prior to the halving, which was a little unique, but we can go back and look at this. So, I mean, just this past year, let's zoom in here. We see this is the difficulty, and the difficulty really follows hash rate. This is probably a more reasonable way of looking at it, but difficulty has been going down. We are at a lowest difficulty we've seen since March of this past year, which coincidentally is also last time we saw this exact price of Bitcoin. So we're also seeing hash rate pull back, 5, 10, maybe 15%. Is this going to continue? Is this miners turning off because they can't afford to pay the power bills? If you listen to the Mining Pod, another podcast from Blockspace Media, we describe what's happening. We interview people, and I would encourage you to go get a more kind of miner focused treatment of this topic that's happening. But because this does affect like broader Bitcoin, and I would say falls into the Bitcoin season 2 purview, I want to focus on this. Here's another Bitcoin mining calculator where I run the numbers of like a mid-tier Bitcoin mining rig. The S19 series where it produces X amount of hash rate and it consumes X amount of power. Basically, at a median hosting rate right now, if you're going to take this machine and you're going to put it on a normal, like all in uh, hosting deal, you're probably flat or losing money right now. This is baked into the cyclicality of how Bitcoin works. um now you're trying to bet on, do you want to upgrade your machines, do you hold on, wait for the price to appreciate, do you hold out to let other miners capitulate, which makes your mining operation comparatively more profitable? We will see. So, are miners capitulating? I think the answer is yes. One of the other narratives that I think we see play out unique to this cycle is that miners may not as much be turning off so much as changing hands. So people are buying or acquiring mining sites and then re-injecting capital or flipping them in some capacity. So I'll end it there, and let's go back into the Bitcoin season 2 narrative. Let's look at the runes market cap. Runes market cap is just barely hanging on over $1 billion. I talk about this every week, but $1 billion is the Casey seppuku uh, threshold, where Casey, the inventor of runes, says, if runes is not over $1 billion a month after runes launches, then I will commit seppuku. Of course, he's kidding about that. But here we are, 2.5 months after runes launched, where runes are now just barely above his $1 billion threshold. So this is reflecting in runes prices across the board. It's not pretty. If you go to Magic Eden, it's just a sea of red with maybe one green ticker. Right now, there seems to be kind of a rotation from this hot rune to that hot rune, while everything else just goes down. So basically, you can join me and some of my friends on Fridays for some spaces where we commiserate and participate in group therapy for our bags, which are down bad. Otherwise, other things that are down bad, ordinals also are just not seeing much activity. Here's a dashboard from Data Always, which shows just number of runes mints each day, and it's been roughly flat over the past few weeks. We're seeing 50,000 um, or so, 30 to 50,000 inscriptions per day. Uh, we're seeing them be a little more JPEG heavy, so more images as the fee rates on Bitcoin go down. Um, so there's not a lot of activity in the ordinals ecosystem. Just as an observation, the prices of some of the assets on secondary, some of the ordinals inscriptions assets are flat over the past week, down in some capacity, but we've not seen the total route that we saw basically April through June. So the prices of these assets on secondary are roughly flat. I think this gets into one of the thing that I want to talk about here. This is one of the core topics I'm having on the stream here is uncommon goods. What is uncommon goods? Uncommon goods is the ticker that Casey, the inventor of runes and designer of the runes protocol, hard coded as the first rune to exist. So each rune kind of has an order or number in which it was created or etched. Uncommon goods, Casey said, I'm just going to call dibs on the first rune, rune 0, and I'm just going to call it uncommon goods. And he did something interesting. You can mint this. There's an infinite amount of these that can be minted over the next 4 years, until the next halving. And you can only mint one uncommon goods rune each transaction. So this is this. There were some of us who had kind of identified what could happen to a rune, which was both prominent because Casey put it out there and had an infinite mint. And I'm going to dive into trying to explain this. So, Rindell, CTO of the Taproot Wizards, put this out there in April. Just thinking out loud here. Uncommon goods is a 1 per mint, open mint for the next 4 years. This means the market price of uncommon goods may never be more than the cost to do a one in, one out minting transaction. Basically, if the price of a rune of 1 unit of uncommon goods is higher, selling higher on secondary than it costs to produce or mint that uncommon goods, then you would theoretically see more of those mints go through. So if the relationship between the secondary price of uncommon goods and the actual production cost as related to Bitcoin fee rate, they would be related. So when fee rates go down and the price of uncommon goods goes up, we would expect more uncommon goods to be minted. So we are actually seeing this play out. This is one of the more interesting things I think happening on Bitcoin right now. As identified and explained by Mononaut, this thesis seems to actually be playing out in a small way. Um, the extra inertia of uncommon goods rune prices has increased the stickiness of on-chain fee rates, dampening out other fluctuations in demand. Unlimited numbers of uncommon goods can be minted via fixed size on-chain transactions. As soon as fee rates drop below that floor, multiple blocks worth of mints flood the mint pool to close the arbitrage gap. So basically, we are seeing this when fee rates go down and they get below the production costs of a unit of uncommon goods, people mint uncommon goods. This is having kind of a smoothing effect on the actual fee rate in Bitcoin. It's hard to see it just kind of taking a look at it, but it appears that the market is that the secondary price of uncommon goods actually is reflecting an on-chain activity. And I'll point out just one of the actors in this on-chain activity, LIFO FIFO. LIFO, notable Ordinals builder and just kind of helper, has the Rune Blaster and also a sniping tool that he's built. And it just helps you just very efficiently mass mint things. And LIFO has, in particular, zeroed in on the uncommon goods ticker. So he's optimized this tool so that if you use this tool to mint uncommon goods, it charges zero fees. He's also optimized it so you can chain these transactions in the most optimal way so you can mint out in these giant batches of uncommon goods. So tools like this through LIFO are being used by the market to create an actual fee floor on Bitcoin. And yes, maybe the fee floor is, as you see here right now, it's 8 to 11 sats per VByte. Yes, the fee floor may be only a handful of satoshis, but we're seeing now an interesting new type of block space demand emerge, which is not just JPEGs. Now, JPEGs have historically increased in the number of JPEGs that are inscribed whenever the fee rates are down, but now we have an actual relationship with token mints, which are related to the which are inversely related to fee rates. So I would like to do a deep dive on this. I hope to have someone on the Bitcoin Season 2 podcast here soon to talk about this with me. So stay tuned and feel free to chat with me online about this topic. I think it's one of the most interesting things. Another good thread to read is Ren, OX Ren from Electric Capital. Also identified this trend, and this was a few days ago where the pricing of uncommon goods is a little bit different than the on-chain cost to produce it, but this is a pretty interesting phenomenon. The last topic I have today is a little technical, so I leave it towards the end. But if you're still with me, this is pretty interesting. A very confusing, overwhelming transaction appeared on Bitcoin this past week. And I'm not gonna try to explain all of it, but basically, if you're a nerd and you saw this transaction happen on Bitcoin, it probably blew your mind because it's not just a normal financial transaction. It's not really an ordinals trend related transaction or a runes transaction. It's a transaction that does like every single kickflip and backflip equivalent of creating and broadcasting a Bitcoin transaction. What do I mean? Well, it had a custom, you would say, um, a novelty transaction ID. it it had all of these crazy outputs and used all these crazy opcodes. It used every single type of uh, of output. It used taproot transaction, used pay to witness script hash outputs. It did everything, and it had an interesting kind of curious numerology component to the size of these outputs, these UTXOs. They seemed to follow some sort of pattern or have numbers embedded in them, and it caused a lot of chatter online about who was behind this, what actually was included in this transaction. There's a lot of speculation. Um, the creator of the transaction came forward and posted on Stacker News. If you're not regularly checking Stacker News, make sure you go there occasionally. It's like Reddit, but for Bitcoin. And this user, Vosternad, who's a well-known, smart Bitcoin developer, they explain all of the things that are contained in this transaction. And I won't go into it, but basically, used all these cool signatures, all these cool timestamps, all these vanity IDs, all these um, novel uses of not novel uses, but cool uses of Bitcoin script. And one of the cool things is that you hear on Bitcoin Season 2, I'll talk about non-standard transactions like Marathon will include these large, 4 mega blocks occasionally with a giant JPEG, and that's a non-standard transaction where it has to be submitted directly to the pool. Well, this transaction was standard. Even though it did all these crazy things, it still was able to be broadcast and circulated through the Bitcoin node gossip network organically and just naturally get into a block. So even if you're non-technical, I would encourage you to go and read this blog post. Maybe you'll understand a little bit of it, but he references famous Bitcoin transactions in here, pays homage to um, uh, people and events in Bitcoin's history. And to round it out, I'll read this. This project took me over a year to complete. Initially, it was just meant to be a transaction with every input and output type serving as a reference transaction for comparing features of blockchain explorers. But as I got more and more ideas, the complexity eventually exploded into what you see here. I learned so much, not just about the Bitcoin protocol, but about Bitcoin's history. So, uh, yeah, go and check this out. Again, going to be a little overwhelming technically, but it is. You do love to see this type of experimentation on Bitcoin. Shout out to Vosternod for getting this out there. Um, Otherwise, thank you so much for listening to Bitcoin Season 2. This is the live stream. It's if you've been listening to this, I try to describe it as best I can, but it's more of a visual presentation. Make sure to watch the stream on YouTube and X. Check out the other block space media content, particularly the Gwart Show and the Mining Pod. Subscribe to the newsletter. Now comes out on Tuesdays and Fridays. We cover all things happening in Bitcoin mining, Bitcoin tech. Otherwise, thank you so much, and I'll see you in Nashville at Inscribing Nashville and Bitcoin 2024. Catch you next week.